Why are we having this debate? Why are we having this debate at all?
Economic immigration is a necessary and powerful solution. Within economic immigration, business immigration has the highest multiplier effect. So it makes sense to prioritize it for much needed immigration reform.
We really have no business program in Canada.
Canada is struggling to maintain ship in the right course. It needs some modifications.
The government of Canada had no problem with private investors under the old program creating these games where people lost all their money. They were okay with that.
What made Canada so special that is something wrong with the RBI for Canada?
So yeah, we're in a deficit position, both from an immigration standpoint, a competitive standpoint, and an investment standpoint.
If this devalues Canadian citizenship or residency, all of economic immigration is doing that. That is also transactional. Here we're saying, show me the capital. There we're saying, show me the skills.
The government may be stupid, but they won't be dishonest.
Yeah, $1 million Canadian dollars will be an easy sell. My point of view will be an easy sell. And we don't need to change anything else.
Hello and welcome everyone to another Catalyst Canada Roundtable. I'm Siavash, Shekarian, chair of CILA's Business Immigration Committee and your host for today's discussion. It's a privilege to be joined by two outstanding superstar lawyers whose combined experience practicing immigration law almost borders a century. Let me introduce them in alphabetical order. We have Colin Singer, a 35-plus-year veteran of the Quebec Bar. Colin is a seasoned immigration lawyer with a broad practice spanning corporate and business immigration. As the founder and president of immigration.ca, he has built one of the most visited online platforms, attracting millions of visitors seeking insight into Canadian immigration. In recognition of his contributions to the advancement of the legal profession, Colin was inducted as a lifetime governor of the Foundation of the Quebec Bar in 2009. We then have Kenneth Zaifman. Called to the Manitoba Bar in 1976, Ken's journey into immigration law began unexpectedly in 1979 when William Cole walked into his office seeking help to fight deportation. That case sparked a decades-long commitment to immigration law and immigration policy, where Ken has become a leading voice in the field. He has served as past chair of the Canadian Bar Association, the past chair of Manitoba Bar Association, and the past chair of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Today, he continues his journey as the founding and managing partner of Zaifman Law in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us in this important initiative. Catalyst Canada is not just another policy discussion. It's an organized campaign responding to the existential crisis Canada is facing today. For years, we've struggled with persistent crises, productivity, business investment, housing, healthcare, education, security, and of course, economic growth. But now, the stakes have escalated by taking an existential turn. When the bully-in-chief decided that verbal insult at our nationhood wasn't enough, we were hit with a full-blown, like never before trade war, one that is seemingly designed to cripple our economy and force us into submission. So at CBIC, we decided to recalibrate our approach. That's how Catalyst Canada was born. At its core, the premise is simple. Canada is in an economic crisis. Economic immigration is a necessary and powerful solution. Within economic immigration, business immigration has the highest multiplier effect. So it makes sense to prioritize it for much needed immigration reform. The promise of Catalyst Canada is about bold thinking and real solutions. Our goal is to reimagine business immigration and unlock its full economic potential at a time when Canada needs it most. We are here to challenge assumptions, break through the inertia of outdated policies, and design frameworks that work, not just in theory, but in practice. Today, we are laser focused on investment migration, a global market conservatively estimated at $50 billion US, with more than 80 countries actively competing for investors in two primary forms: residency by investment, or RBI, or citizenship by investment, CBI. Canada, once a forerunner in this space, officially withdrew from investor immigration landscape in 2014, leaving the field open to countries like the United States, Greece, Spain, Portugal, and Australia, alongside emerging powerhouses such as Turkey and UAE. For some context, the UAE issued over 250,000 golden visas in 2023, making it the largest RVI player in the world. On the surface, the economic case seems obvious. More investment should equal a bigger economy. But these programs are not without controversy. There are valid criticisms, challenges, and cases of abuse that must be addressed. With that introduction, let's dive in. We'll start by giving each guest 2 to 3 minutes to reflect on this fundamental question. Does Canada need to reintroduce a federal investor immigration program? Why or why not? You are, of course, welcome to challenge or comment on the introduction I just provided in that time. And after that, we'll move into a joint discussion followed by our second block, where we will tackle the how. How should a new investor immigration program be designed to maximize economic benefits while maintaining the public trust? We will start in alphabetical order, and I'll pass it over to Colin.
Thank you so much, Siavash. Great introduction. Initial thoughts. Canada had a very dominant position in the passive immigrant investor program. We were one of the first countries after the United States, which started its passive investment program in the early 1990s. And various reasons took hold as to why Canada abandoned ship and has replaced, I'll use it in quotations, our immigrant investor program doesn't exist as it used to, but we do have a startup visa program, which is not a passive investment program. It requires business acumen and other metrics. And Canada launched that program in 2013 as a pilot, and that program became permanent in 2018. And it's the only program that really does have a federal, broad federal mandate to, excluding Quebec, to attract business entrepreneurs, which is quite different than the passive program that was in place up until 2014. Bear in mind, the passive immigrant investor program was first launched by the Quebec government in 1986. And from 1986 until 2019, when Quebec put a pause on its immigrant investor program, it attracted more than $1.3 billion to small and medium-sized enterprises in the province of Quebec. The federal program abandoned ship in 2014. At that time, the federal immigration minister, Jason Kenney, was the longest-serving minister ever in Canadian history, and his determination was that the only benefit was to the immigrant consultants and third-party players involved in the program. But Quebec is a model that clearly demonstrates that there is benefit to small and medium-sized businesses, and I think there is scope for a business program, passive, again, carefully done in a way that attracts the right people, but it would go alongside a startup visa program in which Canada is struggling to maintain ship and in the right course. It needs some modifications, which is certainly being looked at, but I think the two of them have a role to play in attracting the type of clientele that brings to Canada entrepreneurial acumen, investment, in these very interesting times that you alluded to, Siavash, referring to the tariffs that are going to have major impact on our economy going forward.
Ken, I'm just going to hand it to you, and then we'll start the joint conversation.
Well, the immigrant investor program was designed to attract individuals with business or management experience, net worth, who wanted to invest in Canada but not be actively involved in the operation of a business, which was primarily done through the entrepreneurial program. So there was the entrepreneurial immigration program, which allowed people to invest in a business, and the immigrant investor program was designed for people who wanted a passive investment in Canada. And that program was quite successful. It was successful in the sense that there was federal program, and then there were provincial programs in provinces, which enabled funds to invest in companies. But there was also the component to have a government-administered venture capital fund. So they were components of the same program. And I think it was a successful program in the sense that it attracted individuals who had the net worth and who could make an investment and who wanted to immigrate to Canada and establish their residence in Canada. So fundamentally, it was a very good concept. The resistance and pushback throughout the course of that program was that people were buying their way into Canada. And as the program evolved and as some of the private players created schemes that were perhaps not in line with what the objectives of the program were, there's a fair bit of people losing their money under the program, and there was difficult enforcement parts of the program. The government administered funds were a little more, I won't say ethical, but they were a little more regulated, and they invested in small and medium-sized businesses. Colin quite rightly points out that Quebec received a significant amount of capital in the program. And so the objective, when you think of from a higher level, is to attract venture capital into Canada, was an objective that was laudable. And what we have today is we really have no business program in Canada. We have provincial programs which attract business immigrants, but we have no federal program, and there are constraints on the provincial programs on who they can accept as business immigrants. So we have a patchwork quilt of programs. We have no federal program, and we are now definitely losing out on individuals who are seeking to resettle and have the capital to invest. And now we have no vehicle for them to become permanent residents of Canada. So yeah, we're in a deficit position, both from an immigration standpoint, a competitive standpoint, and an investment standpoint.
So fundamentally speaking, is it fair to say that you gentlemen agree that we need an investment program? And then we can talk about the how. But in the fundamental, the way we think, we look at it from the outset, the need is obvious. But I just want to propose some of the criticism that we've heard at this fundamental level. One of them is, of course, the criticism that Ken, you just alluded to, is the resistance, the pushback for buying your way in. It's this kind of like, okay, an investment program devalues Canadian citizenship, right? It commodifies residency by this idea of, okay, I allow you to come here, just show me the capital and you're in. What do you think about this? And I'm going to start with Kenneth, and then we go to Colin.
I mean, if this was the only part of our immigration program, that criticism may be well placed. But we have a number of different pathways for individuals to immigrate. We have low-skilled workers who can become permanent residents under work permits or provincial nominee programs. We have high-skilled immigrants that can enter under express entry. We have a patchwork quilt of programs. So that criticism is really no longer a valid one, because it's no different than saying that because someone comes from an English or French-speaking country and they can meet the language requirements, and those people who can't meet those requirements, it's not proper to have a minimum language requirement or a minimum education requirement or a minimum experience requirement. Any requirement you put in will disenfranchise individuals who don't meet those requirements, but we put them in and we think they're valid public policy objectives. Age, education, language ability. We have decided that all the pathways for people who have business skills or have acquired some net worth or want to retire in Canada, who've amassed sufficient capital to do so, somehow should be excluded from the immigration program. And that fundamentally is wrong. Leaving aside the fact that there are valid public policy objectives in creating a program. And we can outline them after, Colin has his comments.
So Colin, do you agree? Kenneth is basically saying, hey, if this devalues Canadian citizenship or residency, all of economic immigration is doing that, right? That is also transactional. Here we're saying, show me the capital. There we're saying, show me the skills.
So when you're devising a program, you're obviously doing so with the optic of what's available out there on the global stage. When you're the only player, back in the day, Quebec was the first, and Manitoba was probably the second in 1996 when it came out, maybe even earlier. No, well earlier than that. But when you're the only player, it's quite different than when you're one of many players. So the residence through investment and citizenship through investment, that industry is what we're referring to in buying your way in. When you're going to compete in this broad silo, you have to offer certain tangible benefits. Otherwise, you're not competitive at any level. So offering Canadian permanent resident, I would never support getting citizenship as a first off, but giving people conditions to realize permanent residence is I think a very important enticement to be competitive in this broad silo. The United States has a program which is very passive, the Immigrant Investor EB-5 program. They have a certain number. Whatever we devise, we have to be competitive, and most importantly, most importantly, we have to be able to control the volumes that have eluded policymakers. Since, as far as I can remember, most of these programs that existed and have been curtailed were because the inventory of cases became unmanageable, and the program almost became illusory because you could never come to Canada with a visa. 5, 6, 7 years processing times are not reasonable for someone who has a lot of intention to invest significant sums participating in these programs. So you have to curtail the volumes that are in the inventory and give predictable outcomes within reasonable timeframes. When the Startup Visa program came in, which is a business investor program, and I slightly defer and have deference to my colleagues' observation that we don't have a program. We actually do have a program. It's just a different name, and it does bring in very competent certain types of investors. So we do have a program, but you have to be able to control the numbers. You have to put caps in there. You have to put, each year you put a certain number. These are the numbers we're letting in because we can process this number of case. But I do think we should have a passive investor program alongside the Startup Visa program, which is undergoing currently
I agree,
various
but
modifications.
Here's the thing. I totally agree. First of all, if you're going to attack a $50 billion market, you got to look at the competition, right? So you cannot be doing this in isolation. I 100% agree. But then again, that presumes that we're saying we're fundamentally okay with this investment program. And to advocate for that, we have to address the criticism that is out there. So I want to go back to that question. Do you see anything fundamentally wrong with offering residency to foreigners into a country by virtue of passive investment? That's the thing that we want to just make sure. Because Ken is saying, if you were doing this under investment, that's essentially the same thing you're doing with all of economic immigration. See, I understand with refugees, we're not looking at, it's not a transaction. We understand the humanitarian nature of your situation, and compassionately we allow you in. Family reunification, the same thing. But economic immigration, we're basically saying, show us what you can do for us in return of access. So how can this argument only apply to investment and not to the express entry, where we're asking them, where we're discriminating against people based on their age, based on their education, based on their so many other things?
So go ahead. Yeah, Ken. Yeah, well, there's been studies, I hope they're still applicable, on what is the monetary benefit to Canada through the Immigrant Investor Program. There have been, there were a lot of players that came forth came forth with what is the value of each family that comes in on a startup, on an Immigrant Investor Program. And it's the children of the actual entrepreneurs. It's the consumption that brings to Canada a very significant amount of money. And it's the consumption. Obviously, that's a factor, but it's also the children who settle in Canada and bring a certain upbringing that they are having and bring to Canada. So it's multidimensional, both at the initial stages and subsequently what the children of immigrant entrepreneurs bring to Canada. So you're dealing with a very small pool of people, globally speaking, that bring to Canada tremendous benefits, and we can't deny the fact we are offering people an opportunity to call it buy your way in, but it's not purely buy your way in. As Ken alluded to, and correctly so, you can add all kinds of criteria that you wish to make sure that it's not just buy your way in, as the US program EB5 really is. It's just buy your way in, but it is creating economic benefit. That's one of the criteria. Either you create 10 jobs and other measures. But Canada can define the metrics that it would like to accomplish, and then go out and control the numbers of people that get into that program, and make sure output is reasonably done, so that people are not waiting 4, 5, 6 years, because that becomes illusory in its own right, offering something that doesn't come for many, many years. That doesn't work.
You just highlighted another big criticism of this, and that's lack of long-term economic benefit, right? Studies showing, one in particular is by Professor Lay, which he's on our guest list. We're going to have him on so we can talk about his research. I think this is the most cited paper on why business immigration overall is not working. So at the time that he did it, it's 2002. So he was looking at the older program as it was being unfolded, and it had 3 streams. So one of the main criticism, he looks at all the data and he says, look, the investors are coming here, they're not staying here. They're paying a lot less tax than the Canadian born. So what's the benefit here? But Colin, one of the things that Professor Lay also says in his own paper, saying, hey, my data is not complete because I'm not looking at secondary spending, right? I'm not looking at the children. Like this idea of astronauts, right? The dad. Well, let's face the reality, right? Canada is not ripe for entrepreneurship. We're not famous for it. This is not the land of successful businesses, right? We have to burst that bubble. So when a Chinese family come with an investment program, they come here, the dad is like, okay, if I want to continue the kind of money that I've been making, I cannot be in Canada. So they leave the wife and the children, and then they go back, they become astronauts. So secondary spending that you mentioned is a good criticism to the criticism that maybe long-term, maybe we're not seeing the full depth of the long-term benefit. Ken, what do you think about this?
Well, I think we got to look at what is the social objective of bringing in immigrant investors. And historically, we've had this program where you could invest in a private fund or a government administered fund. So when I step back and I look at what do we as a Canadian society require? Let's just look at what springs to mind right now, housing. If we decide that we want to create more housing and we want to set up a government fund, whether it's a provincial fund or a federal fund, where people invest, their investment gets transferred into direct benefit for Canadians, and their capital is at risk, or their money is at risk, then why are we having this debate? Why are we having this debate at all? You look at investment in small and medium-sized enterprises. I'm quite familiar with the Saskatchewan Government Growth Fund, which is a fund that raised over $100 million for small and medium-sized businesses in the province of Saskatchewan over a variety of tranches. Now, not every of those funds was entirely successful, and some investors didn't get all their money back, and some did, or many did, but it was business risk that lost them the money, not people going into this program to ensure that the investors didn't get their money back. So there are ways to address public policy needs. And if I had to craft a program to the extent that I would do it, I think that there should be, and we did have that in Canada in about 2015. And I didn't know this. I was preparing for this. It was called the Immigrant Investor Venture Capital Fund program. And individuals had to make a $2 million investment. They had to have a net worth of $10 million. They had to meet certain language requirements and education requirements. But the unique feature of that program was if you met those requirements, the visa that had to be issued. So the language of that program was not the visa may be issued. The language of the program was must be issued. And they had a cap on those numbers and not a huge cap. So if I look at how I was going to craft a program, and I realize there's the EB-5 program in the US and the programs in other parts of the world, and we're not going to be able to compete with the programs where they're actually selling citizenship, nor should we. But we can compete quite effectively with, the EB-5 program, because there the requirements are pretty
Much
minimal.
higher.
Huh?
Well, the EB-5 is a much more costly endeavor. It's close to $1 million US, so it's 900.
Which is Colin, which is a lot. This is a very interesting comparison, right?
That's where we're competitive. That's where we become competitive. Is the price entry to play at that table is a fraction. It's a fraction.
Sure, but let's look at the IIVC.
My point, I think, makes a good point is we're crafting programs and have crafted programs that had all sorts of requirements. Net worth has to be legally obtained, business or management experience, language, education. These are all components of a program that are not meant to attract immigrants. They're meant to
exclude,
restrict people who can participate in the program. So when I look at the program, if you have the proper Jean-François, you woke up.
Decided to join. How are you, Jean-François?
Sorry, my problem was my computer was on the wrong time zone. Sorry about that.
It's okay. We did the introduction. We're in the middle of it.
And we're
welcome to the roundtable.
Yeah, good to see you. So my point, and then I'll let Jean-François get in.
Please finish your point. I will go to Jean-François.
The program, I'd look at the public policy objective of the program. I would make the admission requirements not as stringent as they were before. I would make it a net worth, a legally obtained requirement, set the investment amount at a significant investment amount, but competitive in the marketplace. And I would allow either the provinces to get involved. We'd have to change the regulations because they can't right now have a provincial nominee program with a passive investment fund. It's in the regulations. I would eliminate financing. So essentially what we're doing is we're making this a pure investment. And after a certain period of time, the investor will probably get their money back. It may not be guaranteed, but there's a social objective to that program, whether it's housing, investing in small and medium-sized businesses. To me, that's a marketable program because there is a lot of still uncertainty with the EB-5 program, although there's some players are better at it than others. So now we have a competitive product, and you don't have to have business or management experience. You may not need you may have to have language, but maybe not. You may not need education because that's all offset by what I consider the public policy objective of the program is to get money from immigrant investors, funnel it through a program into either small and medium-sized businesses or through housing or something like that. And I think that's what I would do.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go to Jean-François. Welcome to the roundtable. I cut you off for introduction. Now that we have Jean-François, audience, now we're well over a century of experience on this roundtable. Okay, Jean-François, born into a legal legacy as the son of a Canadian Superior Court judge, decided not to take the easy traditional path. Instead, he chose the dynamic and high-stakes world of immigration law, building a career that has had a profound global impact. Today, he's the founder and managing partner of Harvey Law Group, a globally recognized leader in investment migration. So that was your introduction. Now I gave it. Welcome to the roundtable. I'm just going to catch you up very quickly. So we're talking in the first block, hey, do we need an investment program in Canada? The answer seems to be obvious. Of course, we're in an existential crisis dealing with everything else. so we can use all the money that we can get. So we were talking about this very important question. If we want an investment immigration program for Canada, passive investment immigration program for Canada, are we happy with the fact that we are, based on at least some criticism, we are selling residency to people? So I'm going to just come back to you. Do you think there is something normatively fundamentally wrong with allowing investors to come into a country getting residency? There is consensus. We don't want to do CBI programs for Canada, but RBI is a very, very attractive option for Canada. So Jean-François, do you think there is something normatively fundamentally wrong with having these programs?
Well, let me revert the question. What makes Canada so special that is something wrong with the RBI for Canada, right?
Well, that's a very good question. How do you answer that? Do you think so?
But see,
If we're
that's the
not,
point. I mean, New Zealand just announced 2 days ago they're revamping their own program, making it less requirement on the residency, and most likely English will be out too. Look, I mean, EB5 Kenneth is a good example, but there's a lot more than that on the market. In terms of RBI, I mean, Colin and Kenneth will remember 15, 20 years ago, we were alone, right? We had New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US, and maybe some of the UK too. Now, it's pretty much every European country has an RBI, and at quite competitive price, to say the least, right? So what I
the
mean,
largest is not Europe anymore. Look at the UAE, 250,000 golden visas issued in 2023. They're the biggest player in the RBI market.
But that's it. So that's a good example too.
Yeah.
I mean, Jordan has an RBI now. I mean, everybody has.
Okay. Now
And
that
here
we're
we go in
okay with,
Canada, we say, should we do it? Should we sell residency? Well, we're not selling residency. To keep the residency, there's some hard condition to follow. And let's say that Canada keep its residency requirement as of now 24 months on 5 years. It will be one of the hardest on the market. Compared to, for example, what New Zealand is coming with, compared with UAE is a great example. There's no residency requirement, right? Almost none. Austria doesn't have, Switzerland doesn't have much residency requirement either. So yes, we do need an investor program in Canada. I heard Kenneth final words on how it should be used. Yeah, that's a good question. Should it be, I don't know if you touch that point. Is it an investment, Kenneth, or is it a donation? Kenneth's not listening anymore.
he's okay.
We lost Kenneth.
We covered some of those points. You're zeroing right in.
Let's focus on the market and the marketability of a potential Canadian program, because that's what we were talking about.
That's what we've all agreed that is essential.
And Colin, Ken made a mention to the IIVC program. You wrote an article about that program, right? I mean, like, how out of place was that program? I mean, by the time that the Canadian government introduced that program to pay us $2 million at risk for 7 years, and then you have a net worth of this, we had the EB5, we had so many other programs. I mean, if we really want to have a chance in this market, we cannot be blind to the competition, can we, Colin?
No, and Jean-François alluded that. We've all talked about that, Ken and I. You're launching today. Today in 2025 is much different than it was in 2025 and 2020. So it's an extremely competitive market, and if you're going to want to have a product, it's got to meet all the metrics at the same time. As Ken mentioned, we have policy considerations. We all admit that, we're not just selling residency. There's all kinds of criteria that policymakers call it window dressing. You want, language, no language. Residency is in the Immigration Act. So we can't have a different residency rule for people who are investing, 2 years and 5 years. You have to be physically present in Canada 40% of the time. So, that we're not going to have different tranches of residency requirement. I wouldn't advocate for that. It's the same residency rules across the board. But whatever it is right now, it's 40%, 2 years and 5 years. Citizenship is a whole different, qualification. Naturalization, citizenship through naturalization, we have rules on that. But I'm in favor of making a product that would be competitive. And as I mentioned, Jean-François, I had alluded to earlier, we already have a startup visa program. It's quite dynamic. Again, the thread that comes to me through all our programs is we have to have a control of processing times. We have to have intake controls. You can't let people just load up on applications. It's each year a certain number. We have a startup visa program. That's our federal program right now. And there's room for a fabulous passive investment program that needs to allow people to those that want to become part of our landscape, they qualify, and indirectly they're becoming Canadian residents because they meet all the metrics, whatever we want them to meet, and we should have that alongside.
Let's talk about the metrics. Let's talk about the metrics first from the perspective of the user. We're doing product design, right? So let's worry about the user, the investor, the high net worth individual. What are they after, right? I'm gonna set the Jean-François, what are you going to say? Okay, I was just going to set the stage where research shows that the market studies of the mentality of the high net worth individual looking for RBI or CBI, mobility, present mobility, future mobility. So present mobility, I want a passport that I can travel, right? I'm a business person. I want to be here. I want to be there. And then lifestyle. So mobility, lifestyle, and business opportunity. These are the things that the mindset of the user is looking for. So let's talk about that a bit. Jean-François, do you agree? You work in this heavily on this field. Is that how you see them?
You see, on our firm right now, we offer for RCBI, but just say RBI, we offer about, I would say, 15 to 16 programs. And, you know, when clients walk in, they don't necessarily have a destination in place. They ask, you know, we ask them, what's your goal? What do you want? Is it tax? Is it family? Is it mobility? Is it this, and that? And from that, we tell them, here's the options, okay? You were talking earlier about marketability, and I think both Colin and Kenneth will agree that Canada is still #1 destination, one of the top destinations. So if you were to offer RBI at the same price all over the world, pretty much would be a war or a competition between US and Canada in terms of destination. So we can afford to be a bit more difficult than, let's say, Spain or Italy, or Austria, or even Switzerland. You know, we can afford to ask a bit more. End user, our clients most of the time doesn't want to be involved. They want to have a one-shot deal. They want to get their document or whatever their legal status in the country of choice and do something else after. They have other things to do. They're usually very, very busy people. So, you know, they have to think about it. Portugal right now, with the state of the funds offer in Portugal, I would say 50% of my clients consider the 500,000 euros a donation. Just to give you an example. They said they may have a chance to make some money with those funds, but I would say half of them consider it as a donation. Because Canada being such a wanted destination, I will make it, right away, I will make it a donation to a fund. You cannot, like, say, a provincial fund or whatever, wherever the client decide to go live, and make it just a donation and just end this whole story about investment. Most of the client doesn't give much of a thought about it.
So hypothetically speaking, if we had a program that we put at a $1 million Canadian and we call it a donation, not even an at-risk capital that can make you return, you're saying that we can capture significant market size?
Definitely, because we will become, I would say, between 500,000 to 1 million. We're talking Canadian dollars. So yeah, 1 million Canadian dollar would be an easy sale. From my point of view, would be an easy sale. And we don't need to change anything else. Colin is right. The residency requirements are quite okay. There's nothing to be too worried about, right?
I just want to make one issue here. As you guys know, we had that program in 2015 where it was, the investment was $2 million. You had to have a net worth of $10 million. In 2025, I don't think we should go back, reculer so far back that the amount of the entry to play at the table is much lower than it was in 2015.
But just to that point, but Jean-François is right in most everything he says, but I don't think the Canadian
public, they won't go for donation. Will not accept a donation like St. Kitts or some of these other Caribbean countries. However, I agree.
This is about language. When does an investment in a fund to provide housing for people when does that investment actually be required to be paid back?
Mhm.
And in other words, it becomes the mechanics of what you invest in. And so I think to that extent, Jean-François is right. Over the years, people want to say how much and how fast. And they don't ask anything more than that.
Right.
And in my view, I think we can devise a program, to Colin's point. Right now, the old investor program was mired in assessments of net worth and business background and management and legally obtained, and then they got business performance assessments that you had to get that verified. There is in a sense some way to do this, and using the express entry model as a guide. No one interviews anybody. So under express entry, your degrees have to be verified. Your language has to be verified through third-party tests. Well, what's the difference than having your net worth verified by an accounting firm?
We had that.
In other words, you standardize the process where then there become inputs on an online form.
Yep.
It doesn't require, and you add the requirement, as they did for that immigrant investor venture capital fund, is once you meet those requirements, whatever those are, the visa office must issue the visa, not may, must. So it eliminates the discretion in the visa officer to say, well, I'm not satisfied that this person intends to reside in Canada. I'm not satisfied that his net worth is legally obtained. I'm not satisfied he's got the business experience. You basically make it a formula. And
But
that,
Ken,
I think,
something is very important here. Do we want these people to stay in Canada? Do we
don't
want
care
to
if they stay
retain?
or
So that's
we
the
don't
thing. That's a
look.
very important point. That goes back to what Jean-François is saying. If you want to, here's when Canada must really decide, right? Like we have learned throughout the years, we cannot have everything all at the same time. If we want to create a program that gives the flexibility and that really compete in this multi-billion-dollar market, we cannot put a hard residency requirement there. And if we don't, then they become ghost residents. Are we happy to live with ghost residents?
We have it already. We have it already.
Just to that point, to remain permanent residents in Canada, you have to live in Canada 2 out of 5 years. If you don't meet that requirement, that doesn't mean you're no longer a permanent resident, because you have to do permanent residency has to be taken away by somebody. And I let people decide if they want to maintain permanent residence or not. I think we should be indifferent, just as we are for every other permanent resident. We don't say, well, you're a provincial nominee, you've got to live in Canada for 5 years or 3 years. We don't make any of those kinds of judgments. So why would we do anything different?
But should we be doing that?
Huh?
I know we're not making that judgment. I know that the immigration system is, I argue, completely blind towards the retention and integration side of things, right? But should we continue doing that? Because, hey, look, we don't want to be the stepping stone. Like, look at the cream at the top, right? They come here, they stay in Canada, they get educated, they use the research funds, they do everything, and then, hey, look at there, we're going to the US. Right? Do we want to continue being this Canada? Because remember the context, right? We're living in the context that the U.S. president is saying, "I'm going to swallow you up, no shame," right? So what are we going to what are we going to do? I'm going to give you a Canadian residency. You come here, you bring your money, and you realize there is nothing business friendly in Canada.
Now,
so let me just pack up and leave.
Colleagues, but what you're saying is irrelevant. It's irrelevant because people from Winnipeg move to Toronto. People from and then people from Montreal move to Toronto, or go to Vancouver, or go to Calgary. We don't control where people live, and some go to the U.S. Why would we want to? People will make decisions about retention, about residency, about where they want to live based on a variety of factors. And we have basic requirements of residency. They meet those requirements, they're residents. If they don't meet them, they're not residents. And I don't think we have to worry about trying to add different modifiers to that concept. I don't know what you think, JF,
I
but
mean, the concept, I mean, this is a good question, but again, I don't think that's the debate today. What they do once they invested and get their permanent residence is their choice, like Kenneth said. And as for the donation, as you know, many government doesn't call it donation, they call it contribution, right? So, you were talking about window dressing, so here's some window dressing for you. Call it contribution, and that's it, to a fund. And like you say, Kenneth, to what point can we expect a contribution to a fund for social housing can be reimbursed, right, or can pay back something? Right? The interest on this contribution is something else, right? That's so be it. But Colin, you're saying that you would keep it at 2 million? You would go for 2 million because the competition now in the market is quite high.
Yeah. So again, as you pointed out earlier, we're a tier one country. We're a sought out, we're very highly sought after, and we're not looking to have big numbers in a program like this. I think it should be one tool amongst our business program, which one of them is already in place, which is the startup visa program. So we're creating another program inside our business, our large silo of business, which is not so large, but it would be, cater to a certain number of people, and in 2015 it was 1,000 per year. There was a limit on that program, and so it's finding, and again, we have so many policy needs right now socially. We have housing, we need a fund for housing. This program could cater to 1,000 investors a year. They put a $2 million and give them also, there's so many ways to craft it, but one of the elements that would be interesting is when the program does well, when the fund does well, the investors are going to realize certain gains. Some funds do marvelously well. So you'll give these people upside as this fund does well, but you could give government the legal right to determine we need to create X amount of units of housing in Canada, and we're going to use this fund to fund this major crisis that we have, and it's for 1,000 players a year, whatever the criteria is. If you feel I think language is always going to be a certain element of criteria, whether it's 5 on an IELTS or whatever it'll be. But we can craft out a limited number. We're going to sell out. I mean, there's no doubt we're going to sell out. 1,000 units a year is not so much, and we might as well make big money off of it. Might as well build a nice fund. 1,000 times 2 million. That's going to be quite quickly capped. It'll be a very nice cap quite quickly. I think so.
At the risk of disagreeing with Colin, I think the number has got to be competitive in the marketplace. I think that 2 million is probably too high and 1,000 is too low. I don't see this. I think that as practitioners and dealing with clients, and over the years, as JF knows, and they come with maybe not a great deal of knowledge about where they want to go, but they have an idea that they want to go, whether it's a tier one country or Canada or Australia or New Zealand. They will make decisions because they want to leave or basically have residency in another country because the conditions of their home country may not be ideal for them. And they move for that reason. JF knows more about this than I do.
But
I think
can I interject?
So just to that point, I don't want to belabor this point. I'm not so worried about whether the investor gets money back or not at the end of the day. The programs should be devised that they may get their money back, but it's not the primary purpose. The primary purpose is to offset providing individuals with a vehicle to come to Canada with the social policy. I wouldn't have a language requirement. I wouldn't have I wouldn't have an inhibitor on a speedometer. I would just say, what is it we want? We have a public policy. We need investment capital in certain sectors of our economy that we need. And we have individuals who have the money to do that. Then, as long as they have their net worth and it's legally obtained and we have all those things in place, do we care whether they've inherited the money or not? Or they had business experience, or maybe they have management experience? Do we really care what their education level is. I mean, is that the basis for doing it? And JF knows, the Caribbean countries don't ask you whether you can speak English or not. They don't ask you what your education is.
That's true. Yeah.
They just say, write us a check. You have to pass a stringent security check, and we'll use the money as we deem appropriate. And that seems to work in the marketplace. And I'm not saying we go to the bottom, but we don't have to go to the top either. That's just my view.
Look at it from Canada's perspective too, because what we've been doing right now, we're looking at it from the investor's perspective. From Canada's perspective, you say, let's not ask for language requirement. And I think, Jean-François, this is an important topic because if we want a sustainable program, if we don't want to just come up with an investor program that gets canceled because a few headlines come out in newspaper and everybody freak out, we need to address the elephant in the room, right? If we're saying we don't need you to have language requirements, we're basically essentially saying, hey, we don't care if you integrate or not. So are we because some countries in the Caribbean, there are some countries, 50% GDP of which are dependent on the CBI program. Canada has a big economy, so we're not as dependent on investment as some Caribbeans are. So back to the bigger question to make sure that this program is public opinion proof. How are we gonna strike a proper balance between what Canada wants and what the investor wants?
No, okay, first of all, you need to realize the power of the media room at the ILCC, right? So there will never be a foolproof program. And the day the ILCC disagree with the program, they just tell their media room, have fun for a day or two, and it's over, right? Okay, let's agree on that first. Language requirement is non-existing in most of RBI programs. Nobody asks you to speak Spanish or Italian or Portuguese to access their residency program. Why would Canada should? Right? Okay, fine. For political reason, you want to say people find you need to speak some English or French. Great. Okay, so make it a very low scale, not at 5. 5 is for SUV, I believe, which is, makes sense because they need to conduct business in Canada, and the investor doesn't have to. Again, window dressing, put some level of English or French, 2 or 3 or whatever it may be. Like my English is what, 2.5, 3. So something like that, and it's fine.
Jay, I can only say that your English is.
I wish this was 2.5, 3. No, 2.
Say that again, Kenneth. I didn't hear you.
I said your English has gotten worse since the first time I met you.
Yeah, no kidding. It's just because, where I work from, I don't speak English much either, right? Few other language, but not English indeed. So but listen. So bulletproof or public opinion proof business program, any business program, it's a dream. Okay, that will never happen.
Well, I tend to disagree, but let's see what Colin thinks. Do you think do you think there is a chance that we can have something that the public is also happy about, and we can talk about what the public wants, but from their immigration system?
It's window dressing, and we elect government to make these decisions. We don't. It's not the public that's going to decide. This is policy. This is government elected officials, and as you guys both have said, it is window dressing. So whether it's this much, we'll find the right policy criteria. Right now, we have major need for housing infrastructure. We're going to be thousands of units short as we go forward, and I think that's an opportunity for government, whether it's the new government coming in or the current government, whichever government is in place. We have an opportunity to bring in investment, and it's like Jean-François and. It's window dressing. So maybe not 2 million, whatever the fine tuning is. Language requirement. Again, policymakers are not going to have no language requirement. And Jean-François, your English is far better than you claim. So startup visa is 5.0 is a very low threshold. It's very, very low. And you do want people coming in who can communicate in English. It's problematic. To not be able to communicate.
Colin, you are for language requirement, and you're proposing that CL be 5.
Some language requirement is reasonable. Some language requirement, maybe not. Again, some language requirement.
Because look at the Quebec experience right now. They have an Sorry,
Sorry, but
Jean-François, but from what I heard from the intermediaries in Quebec, that with the new Quebec program that we have, it has
It
such
won't
a
attract it won't
it's
attract 100 people a year. Okay, the
exactly. And
Quebec,
why is
not even
that?
100.
And
No,
why
not even.
is that? Why
well,
is that?
the reality of the Quebec program is that anybody, I mean, most French speaker who have that kind of money already meet the skilled worker criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Okay.
how it is. Because we look at all the other criteria of the Quebec Investor Program, it's very hard not to be able to, beside age maybe, but
Yeah,
beside that,
age. Age
beside
is a big
age,
problem.
but
Yeah,
that
Because they
age,
age.
want
but
education, they
a
want
young,
language
under
requirement, they want
40,
business management, they want
yeah,
everything. And that
Okay,
doesn't make sense.
The Quebec program is purely a political program right now. It's
yeah,
purely
that,
politic. That's all it is. It's just a political issue.
that's
But
right.
then
And
immigration
this
is
is
purely
why
political.
Quebec program is one of the only program in the world that my firm do not offer, believe it or not. It's not part of our portfolio. But Colin, just Kenneth, I'm sure you will agree. I would prefer to have 1 million investment with 2,000 cap or 3,000 cap as a owner of a law firm. So I have more space to sell, right? That's what we are in for. And
Yeah, so
I
it's
think it,
window dressing. It's
yeah,
window
but that's
dressing.
it.
Whatever the program is, it's going to be a million, whatever it is, but there's room for a passive immigrant investor program. I think we all agree that we have an appetite, our country should have an appetite for a version of a passive immigrant investor program like we've had for so many years. And the efforts are now on the start of visa program, and our bureaucrats and civil servants are very busy right now trying to fine tune that program and deliver, which currently is like something like 35,000 applicants with their family members are
Yeah,
waiting to get to Canada.
but then
Yeah.
again, Colin, startup visa is a different world. It's like we're expecting them to come here, actively manage the business as entrepreneurs. So let's go to the core. The core here is talking passive investment. Show me the money, invest the money somewhere, and I'm okay with you coming in, right? So let's keep investment where investment is. And if
Okay.
language education is window dressing, let's put that aside. And I want to play the devil's advocate, right? I want to be like the Canadian government. Where do we take the money?
Sorry, what did you just ask?
Where do we take the money?
Where do you invest the money?
Yes. Or
Yeah, but
more
Oh,
importantly, because we can say housing, we can say venture cap. How are we going to invest the money? Are we doing it the way that the governments did it? Pay it to the government and then interest free? Are we doing it the way the IIVC wanted to give it to the to BDC to manage the fund? I mean, go to the entrepreneurial ecosystem and ask people, at least in Toronto where we are active, ask people what they think about BDC as a fund manager of a venture capital. So how are we going to do it?
Well, the how is not that complicated. Every province has a development corporation. And the federal government has a similar kind of vehicle. It depends what you want to do with the money. And at the outset, if you say, as the federal government did when they had their federal program, they loaned it to communities and who were building community centers, and they had to pay it back because they had to pay back the money. It was essentially funding projects, but the end user had to pay it back because the government guaranteed that it would be paid back. And if there was financing involved, I think we abandon all that. I'm not so concerned of where we're going to put the money. We know now what there's a deficit. Infrastructure.
okay,
I said
okay.
housing. Every community, every city doesn't have enough money to build community centers, to deal with the day-to-day things that we have to deal with. And we're in a position where governments are running deficits, and if the new government comes in, there's going to be cutbacks all down the road. So why are we getting so hung up on where the hell the money's going to go?
Because
We
if the
say
money,
this
because if we
fund.
pay it to the government ends up wasting it, and if it's wasted, what's the benefit of
Well,
the program, right?
listen,
What about the EB5? Let's talk about the EB5 model. EB5, they allow and we are doing it somehow in the startup visa ecosystem, right? Like, I mean, why am I going to pay it to the government that is showing me that they're wasting everything that we're already giving them? Why extra investment?
well,
Is
the
there
government,
any way that we can creatively think
just to
that
your point, the government may be stupid, but they won't be dishonest. And in the EB5 program, there were a lot of programs which were destined to fail from the get-go and were never designed to return the capital. We had private administered funds in Canada under the old immigration program, which were set up, I know a few in Manitoba, which were destined to fail. They were not designed, they had no hope in hell of getting the investor back the money. They were meant for the promoters and the developers to take all the money, and at the end of the day, there was little for the investors. But the government administered fund, at least the one I was involved in, actually did invest in small and medium-sized businesses, did have economic benefit, but not all the investments paid off. Some of the companies went bankrupt. So the investors didn't get all their money back, but it was business risk. It wasn't development fees. It wasn't the layer of fees that sucked all the money out of the program. JF probably knows that. There was a gold mine in Saskatchewan that started off, they started off, they were going to build a shopping center, and then they decided to pivot to a gold mine. And of course, the investors never got their money back, ever, because it went down the hole of the gold mine.
But Kenneth,
Jean-François, what do you think?
I think, let me be honest, I'm quite disconnected of the infrastructure in Canada. However, I'm sure that there is existing entity or existing network that can absorb that money and do something intelligent with it. Is does Federal Bank of Canada still exist? Is that something that still exists? Remember at one point the Federal Bank was involved many years ago. Is it directly with the private sector? Maybe that would be the best, or a mix of private sector and government. I would definitely be more comfortable with provincial government handling that, or even smaller entity of the government. But you know what? Again, I'm being selfish as a practitioner and the owner of the firm. You know, I'll be happy to sell it. I'll be probably sell it really quickly to my clients. And what happened after? Well, I said, good luck, guys. Have fun, make something good with the money. But
do you think the client wants options?
Sorry.
Do you think the client would want options? Imagine a client walks in, I want to tell them about the Canadian investment program, and there's a portfolio that they can look at. They want to invest their money in housing. They want to invest their money in VC. Do they care? Do they not care?
You know what? No. The best example, Portugal was still very, very busy with Portugal. I think we stop at 8 funds now, but there's at least 16 or 20 funds available in Portugal now for the 500,000 euro. And, we have to let the client make a decision. As a lawyer, we prefer to let the decision make a decision which funds you want to invest. And, honestly, most of the clients look at the funds and they look at us and, close their eyes and put their finger, and they say, I want this one, because they have other things to do. For most of our clients, 500,000 euro, it's, there's a certain amount of time they can spend thinking about how they will invest that money. More than a day thinking about it, they start to lose money. You understand? They have more money to make somewhere else with other investment, right? They know, they know it's going to cost them €500,000 to get it. They see all those funds. They would take usually a blue chip fund because everybody like blue chip. And that's it. End of it. They don't look at it. They just don't.
I think we're all aligned. I think we're all aligned that there's a need for a program like this. It's just a matter of what it would look like, we're all aligned that there's a strong need for a program like this.
We're talking about the how now. We kind of like organically moved into the how. We know that we need a program, and we're looking at the how, and the how has to balance. We're looking at it from how we approach product design. Look at what the user wants. Look at what the owner wants. Owner is Canada. User is the high net worth individual. The high net worth individual, Jean-François is saying, the market is dominated by people who don't care. They're just looking at the certainty. Ken alluded to certainty. They're saying, hey, you must issue a visa. I'm not going to give you discretion. You check the boxes. You pay the money. You're entitled to the visa. That's the kind of mindset that we're dealing with on the end user side. But we also have to care about the mindset that we're dealing with on the Canada side. Right? And on the Canada side, how we are investing the money and how we are showing the result of the program. Because I think it's important to go back to that criticism that Professor Lay in his paper wrote. he's making some very interesting points about the investor program and how the government was trying to inflate the success of the program without actual data and without actual thinking. So if we want to prevent that, we have to have solid arguments that we can get the. I don't want to get into the details of, is it the public that has the ownership of Canada or is it the government of the day? So I rather go back to the root of a democracy, assume it's the public. And I'm saying, let's talk about how we can ensure that the public perception side, and we can definitely talk about, and I think it's too good to talk about, what is it that the public want from an investor program? Are we investment friendly?
I completely disagree. The government is not. The government is elected, and the policymakers are in place. The public does not decide on what kind of programs we're putting in place. Generally speaking, anyways. But I think we could look at this whole concept just as if it was a startup visa project. You look at what you're looking to accomplish. You look at the number that you're looking to raise. You're looking at what the marketability of your product is, and you put all the numbers in and what you're trying to accomplish, just as if you're putting a new startup visa project on the table looking for investment, whether it's pre-seed, pre-seed, or Series A or Series B. You're looking to accomplish a certain investment tier threshold, and how you're going to go and get that and what you're going to offer. And this is something we can put together to the membership, people who have some contribution in the space could be coming up with some thoughts and put a business proposition together. And here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the money we want to raise, and here's how we're going to go about doing it. And here's the benefit to Canada. And we could put the numerical benefit year by year quite easily. This could be done very, very quickly, as far as I think.
I'm sure there is, indeed, I'm sure there is plenty of, tools, existing tools. But you make a good point. Public will need to know how this money is invested, or at least how this money is managed. And again, we're talking 2,000 cases at 1 million each. If I'm correct, that's $2 billion. I'm sure there's plenty of people that would be more than happy to make offers as how to manage that $2 billion.
200 million. That's 200 million.
No, 2,000 cases at 1 million
is 100
That's $2
million.
That's $2 billion.
That's not a very significant number. $2 million is not much. You can't do very much with $2
billion.
I thought I heard million.
No,
now we're talking, $2 billion is
2,000 cases at 1 million. It's $2 billion.
Is a $2 billion.
That's kind of fun to manage, right?
So, but Jean-François,
that would be a great financial injection into solving lots of problems.
But it's not as simple as that, because let's look at how we've been doing the investment programs, right? The ones that we had. Let's talk when they jumped from $400,000 to $800,000. The $800,000 you lock 5 years interest free. What's the rate, right? Let's say you put in $1 million. It's 5%, 50,000, 5 years. That's $250,000 that you bought your way in, because we pay you the money back after. So all I'm doing is I'm collecting interest from your money. That's the guaranteed type of investment. So one important question that we're going to have to talk about is, the investment we're going to take, is it guaranteed or at risk? If it's guaranteed, so the end user is happy because they say, okay, I'm going to park my money. And Ken said, let's not do financing, because at some point in time, instead of $800,000 that the investor had to pay, they could finance it, right? There were financing firms that they could finance the investment, so that defeats the whole economic benefit point. So let's talk about that. Guaranteed or at risk?
You just make a good point. You just make a good point to make it a contribution. Make it a contribution, and nobody would be tempted to finance it anymore, right?
Okay, so you're saying, okay, but is that marketable? If we're saying contribution,
1 million contribution to Canada, please give that to me tomorrow. I'll sold out in 6 months.
So 1 million, no expectation of return, money, just donate, and I'm in.
Pure contribution.
Okay, Colin, so, what do you think about this? At risk? Okay, Ken, and then Colin.
That the government will never allow a contribution to get permanent residence. They will, however, craft a program that does not offer a guarantee of repayment. And that becomes a question of semantics and a question of where the money goes and the end, how the end user deals with that money and what obligation is it on the end user to repay that money. I
I
think we're
heard
going to get to the same place.
I
I
heard
think
Colin was saying, Kenneth, I heard Colin was saying he agrees with you. And tell me, why doesn't the government agree that we get contribution for $1 million? They don't have to be responsible about what are they going to do with the money?
I don't think any government will allow a high net worth individual to make a donation to the Canadian government to get permanent residence. I just think it's not in the DNA
Sure, but
of the
how
Department of
is that
State. I think,
fundamentally,
but
normatively, and logically
listen,
different from paying the
the
money,
government,
unlocking
no,
the...
no, sorry, the government of Canada had no problem with private investors under the old program creating these schemes where people lost all their money. They were okay with that. It was a donation to the developer and the promoter. They didn't have a problem with that for 1 minute because they were divorced from that conversation. So we just have to use the examples of the past to see what's acceptable to the government in a program. I
Okay,
mean,
so let's agree, guys. A non guarantee investment without
exactly.
any guarantee of repayment of whatsoever interest, capital, etc. Okay, I like it. Very clear. I can still sell it.
Of course you can sell it
So,
because your people are writing a check, and
Yeah,
but
and that's the world you live in.
yeah.
And so, like, I don't know how much, I know we're ending off in a few minutes, but there's nothing wrong with that world, in my view.
Yeah. Well,
There's nothing wrong with that world as long as people are looking for a safe haven. And I will worry about the downstream consequences of how they integrate and how they settle and whether their children come or whether they go to school or what they do down the road.
mhm.
I'm not worried about that.
No, I'm not either.
given the time, do any of you gentlemen see a concern about the due diligence part of this? I think
No,
due diligence can
let
be
me
handled quite easily. Or
let,
do you
let
have
me
a...
let me answer that. I'm sorry. That's a big change on the market for the last 10 years. It's because of the RCBI, the CBI, notably in Caribbean and other programs around the world. The due diligence industry has evolved so much when it comes to immigration that I will even tell I would suggest to the Canadian government just contract it like all other governments. And most of
Okay.
government now are subcontracting the due diligence in their case. They make the client pay for it, and sometimes directly. Either you pay the government like 5 to 10,000 US to the government additional fee for them to pay the due diligence company, or you can pay the due diligence company directly if you prefer, or something like that. Depends on there's so many programs now. But
But not a concern.
the due diligence industry now, it's so evolved that good luck if you're a money launderer or launderer. If you're doing money laundry or have your money
And
is not clean, good luck to you.
JF will
Good luck to
remember
you.
that the visa office in Hong Kong, when they had all these investors,
Yeah.
decided to get them to complete a business performance assessment,
BPA.
a BPA, and they contracted with the 5 accounting firms,
Yeah.
and they offloaded that whole part of that assessment to those companies. And he's absolutely right. The due diligence and the level of inquiries is so sophisticated now. And you've got accounting firms, you've got private investigating firms, you've got worldwide firms doing this. It's very easy to contract it out and to get a positive determination. They're not making too many mistakes.
A
Yeah.
reliable
I'm not sure.
determination. That's what Jean-François is saying, and that's what Ken is agreeing with. We can get a reliable determination of due diligence of where the source of the money is, who the person is. We can reliably outsource it, so it's not an administrative headache per
No,
se.
no, I'm not sure if the union of CBSC will agree with what statement, but that's another story.
Okay. Because there was an FATF report which the London School of Economics responded to. There's certain amount of talk about due diligence in this space, but we're lawyers, we know how this works. So okay. We agree that there's not a particular concern that we have to be worried about if we want to propose an investment program. But
Not
again,
anymore.
what remains, the requirements that we want, which you all agree, it's window dressing. So we are willing to compromise on the requirements as far as at least language goes, right? Because education is a different thing. Business management experience, yes, definitely. It makes sense for something like the start a visa program, but it doesn't make sense if I want to get somebody's money to be put in an investment, right? So language remains something that we can be flexible upon. The only thing that I'm not so sure about of whether we come out with consensus after this meeting is how are we going to spend the money or at risk or guaranteed investment? Is it fair to say that we all agree not guaranteed?
Yeah, that I think we can agree on that, guys.
Colin, Ken?
Not
It should be
guaranteed.
Not
Say what?
Guaranteed. Not
guaranteed.
guaranteed. So the way that we've been doing it is we have been guaranteeing the investment. Park it for 5 years, I'll pay you back. We are saying we don't want to do that anymore. We want to go to at-risk investment. So invest your money at your own risk.
Yeah, I have a problem.
Only Canada was what thought that it was a great idea to guarantee the return, and so people could take that piece of paper from the government of Canada and go to a bank and get it financed, and
Exactly.
that it had value. In 5 years, it was worth X amount of money, and the person would they'd get their money up front or the return, and then 5 years later, the bank or whatever would get the return. It was
So
it
thoughts are
was an idea in a bureaucrat's mind that this was the only way you could sell it. But
if it's going to be at risk, the investor has to be able to verify what that risk is. So
Well,
everyone,
if
it's at risk, then the investor will have to verify whether they have the appetite for the so-called risk that's being imposed. Yeah,
Guys,
that's all window dressing. Again,
well,
it's
this
window
is not
dressing.
so much window dressing because if we say we want to do at risk, then that creates the administrative burden of making sure where that offer of investment comes from. And then we have to make sure for the sake of Canada and the end user that they have transparent information, right? Because one of the biggest criticism of the EB5 program is, hey, you go to these unemployment regions, you go to these regions, you want the money to go to like affordable housing, but they end up being redirected to luxury buildings, right? So that essentially at-risk investment comes with administrative burden, which every government just want to run away from, right? So that will be put on our shoulder. Because what is Catalyst Canada doing here, right? We're proposing policy. We're not just saying, hey, we need one. We're saying we need one, and it should look like this.
look,
So
I have an old proposal under the Immigrant Investor Fund that I could dust off and change the numbers and give it to the government, and they'd be just fine with it, and the investors would be fine with it. At risk does not mean that it's a guarantee. At risk means it's at risk. And the government says, I'm putting it in this investment, I'm building this plant, or I'm building this housing. At the end of the day, the agency that runs the housing may be able to pay it back or not. I don't know. We're not saying they will. We're not saying they won't. We're not CMHC. So I think we're focusing too much on that because
I agree.
The reason for putting this in place, and as JF quite rightly pointed out, is this is not an investor concern. This is us as publicly minded citizens of Canada who are abhorrent at the thought that an investor would write a check for $500,000 and not care if he ever gets it back or not.
And I think they will. I agree.
We have to protect that investor from his own decision making.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do that. And we're going to put in all these checks and balances. Now, I'm not being flippant, but I don't think we don't want someone to steal the money. That's not the purpose of the program.
Okay, sure, but let's trust our investor a bit more.
The investor more protection than he's asking for.
But that's it. That's it. You cannot. You're totally right. They just want. Anyway, I will not repeat what I was saying.
Ken is essentially.
Anyway,
I understand. Ken is saying
we were set for 1:30. I'm glad.
Sure. I was just going to give everyone a final word on the matter, and then we wrap this up. But I think Ken's end point is, hey, at risk, make it a contribution, but make it look like at risk investment.
I think
you're saying don't give investor more.
I don't want to get into linguistics. I think it's an investment. It's an investment with a public policy component to it that has some basis of perhaps repayment, but it's not guaranteed, and it's very clear that they may not get paid back. I don't know. Okay?
And Colin,
Yeah.
remind me, give me your address. So for Christmas, I will send you a soft touch keyboard.
Yeah,
You
I
hear
was
me
muting,
banging away?
Colin. I
You
was
hear me
muting.
banging away?
Yes, I was
We
muting
can
you
hear you
all
banging
along.
away.
It's okay. So let's go to the
Okay,
final thought.
I omitted to mute
Anyways,
my mic. I'm
From
so
That's
me,
sorry.
okay.
from me to you,
I'm
I'm sending you a
so sorry.
soft
JF,
keyboard.
what am I?
So
What's wrong with
sorry.
me?
Bad news. Sorry,
But
boys.
before
It's
I
fine.
Sorry,
This is
boys.
more work for the editor. It's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna give you final
I'm gonna
thoughts.
get the last word with JF. I want
Yes.
to
So we're
apply
gonna.
for that job you had posted, but you didn't say what the salary was. Based
I
in
want the
Vancouver.
job in Vancouver. Oh man, tell me what you want, you get it.
Well, the one you advertised. I was
Well,
going
in
to
Ontario,
apply.
we're changing the law, so you have to disclose what you're paying as salary. I'm not sure how it is in BC, but okay, gentlemen, time for the final thought. We're gonna do it alphabetical order. We're gonna start with Jean-François, then move to Colin, and then to Kenneth. Your final thoughts on the matter, Jean-François.
Very quickly, Canada is missing on the needs of the market. There's a great offer. I mean, there's a great need on the market for Canadian product. Up to them to decide if they want it or not, or they want to let the other country just keep taking everything for themselves. C'est tout.
Colin?
C'est la fin.
Thank you.
My observations are that we have a certain annual levels of immigration coming to Canada. I think business immigration is an important component. The self-employed category has been muted and will be for many more years. It's not really a business program. We need a certain number of candidates coming to Canada under business. We currently have a startup visa program, which is bringing in, it was supposed to be 6,000 and was put down to 2,000. Next year will be 1,000. We have a new government coming in. We know the numbers are going to be tweaked again, but business should comprise a certain number, a significant number of that entire silo. And within that silo, I feel there is appetite for a passive investment under like we used to have, of some modified version. Exactly how, it's a question of how much we want to sell. What is the potential valuation of this program that it can be? Whether it's 1,000 of main applicants a year, 500 applicants a year to start. I'm completely in agreement with my colleagues that there is appetite for such a program, and we can bring in, as the numbers Jean-François put out, $2 billion if we sold 1,000 investors. If you want to have $1 billion for 500, we could put a great program together with the 135 years of experience the three of us have, and go to the entire community of business business immigration professionals. I think we can come up with a great program that would be successful.
Ken?
The Immigrant Investor Program, in its original design, met an economic benefit need. We vacated that space. Others have taken that space. If we don't get back with an immigrant investor program that allows individuals to come to Canada based on investment, then we are not fulfilling a need that is not being met by governments, not being met by other programs, and will put us at a disadvantage going forward. So to that extent, I don't think it's if we do it, I think we must do it. And the sooner we do it, the more individuals will then look to Canada as a player in this market as it was many years ago.
Well, perfect. Thank you very, very much again, gentlemen, on behalf of the Business Immigration Committee and on behalf of the Canadian Immigration Lawyers Association. I thank you for your time and attention.